this Ignatian year.
Welcome to this episode of Designation Year. My name is Paola Pascual Ferra, and I'm Associate Professor of Communication at Loyola University Maryland. I am joined by my colleague, Sean Bray, who is the Interim Vice President for Mission at Loyola, and Dr. Martin Camper. Dr. Martin Camper is the director for the Center of the Humanities since July 2021. He's also an associate professor of writing at Loyola. He believes the center is in a powerful position to support, stimulate, and shape humanistic endeavors on campus and in the broader community that are truly reflective of the human experience in all its variegated manifestations. We are so excited to speak to Martin today. Martin is a great colleague, wonderful spirit, and brilliant mind. And if you haven't had a chance to read some of his work, I definitely encourage that you do, particularly his work on rhetoric. So Martin, welcome. We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you
Sean?
both for having me. I'm really excited for this conversation, and I'm really excited to be talking about the humanities.
Martin, thank you for joining us today. Throughout the year, Paola and I have been generating a list of people we've wanted to be in conversation with. And so we are very excited to be having this conversation. I feel like we've been talking about having a conversation with you for some time, and specifically around humanities and the role of the humanities within Jesuit education. And as most people who are joining this podcast will know, that we started this podcast as a way of sharing more of the story of St. Ignatius of Loyola and the works that came from his life and his ministry, which created a beautiful Ignatian spirituality and led to this Jesuit education model that we are a part of today here at Loyola University Maryland. And so one of the first things we did is we shared the story, or parts of the story, of St. Ignatius. And so as we come to the podcast, we always like to invite our guests to share some of their story. And one of the questions that I'd like to offer you is just, could you tell us about how you came to encounter Jesuit education? There's lots of ways and institutions and educational systems that you could be working in, that you could be offering your talents, your wisdom, your experience. And yet here you are. Something brought you to Loyola, and at some point you encountered Jesuit education. And so, Martin, could you just tell us a little bit about what brought you to Jesuit education and maybe what keeps you in Jesuit education?
Sure, absolutely. So, I think, so when I was on I don't know if everyone who's listening or watching this podcast knows how the academic job cycle works, but, when you're finishing up your PhD, you end up sending out dozens, scores of applications to universities and colleges all over the country, hoping for an interview and hoping ultimately for a job offer. And I remember when I saw the ad on the MLA job list for a position in the writing department at Loyola, and I was just really excited about it. I really didn't, I did not grow up Catholic, and I didn't really know what a Jesuit education was. But my undergraduate education was at a small liberal arts school, and I saw in Loyola, I said, okay, I recognize some of these, kind of values of liberal education here that really attracted me. And I also liked the small size. One of the things that I appreciated when I was an undergraduate was the community, which I know is one of our Jesuit values. And I thought, you know what, I like the idea of being able to connect with students and build relationships with them and work together. I think another thing that drew me and attracted me to Loyola as I started to dig in and learn about what Jesuit education was about was this missional focus, this focus on serving others, seeing education as in part a means to service, to bettering the world, to working for justice. And that really appealed to my own sensibilities and sense of call, and even, my own religious convictions about the importance of, loving neighbor and doing what we can to, improve the lives of those around us. And so I think, that liberal education and that missional focus, so it really drew me to Loyola, so that, as I went through the interview process, I got more and more excited. And when the job offer came, I was just so ecstatic. And even when I visited campus, I could just feel the camaraderie. I could see that the members of this community were living out those values. And I was just really impressed. And so what's kept me here, I think, is some of those same things. I think now that I've been here for 8 years, I was hired in 2014. I've been able to build some of those relationships that I was hoping to build, with students, with other colleagues. I've seen and been a part of some of the ways that the university is working to live out those values, live out its mission. I really, one of the things that I really like about Jesuit pedagogy is this focus on discernment and reflection. And that actually dovetails well with some of the best practices in teaching writing, which is what I do. That reflection is actually a critical part of developing as a writer and learning how to write effectively. And so for me, that kind of contemplative spirit that I think pervades our campus culture really meshes well with how I approach the teaching of writing. And then, I just think we have great students, I have great colleagues. Like, I don't know, it's just, it's such a wonderful community here. It's so warm. And so I think now that I'm in this position as director, I have a new agency to be a part of the Jesuit mission and Jesuit education. And that's certainly something that is exciting me now and something that keeps me here.
That's so wonderful, and it's definitely exciting to see you step up in this leadership role and be able to inspire other young faculty as well who have recently come to Loyola and can also see, what you've sensed from our Loyola community about that real, desire to be there for others and to grow with others in community. So I had several questions for you. The first question I had for you is, in your view, is there a connection between the humanities and the deepening of one's spirituality? And I ask this question because I understand how important an education in the humanities has been for the Society of Jesus and their education ministry. And we're also coming to a point where our student body becomes increasingly more diverse, right? Where before there were, a majority or at least a big percentage of students were coming from Catholic backgrounds, that it may come to a point where that might not be the case. So then we have that core liberal studies that is really the essence of a Loyola undergraduate education. How does that fit into how you perceive as the spiritual development of the student in the 4 years that they spend with us at Loyola?
I think there is a kind of deep and intimate connection between humanities education and spirituality. The humanities are about the human. The humanities disciplines are, they tackle the fundamental questions of what it means to be human, what our collective and individual purposes in life are, what's the meaning of life, what does it mean to lead a good life. And I think the humanities in all their various manifestations tackle and provide a space for exploring and inquiring into those questions. And I think that I don't think you need to be a religious person or a person of faith to have spirituality. I mean, I think, when I think about spirituality, I'm thinking about the inner life, right? Our interior selves, right? The part of ourselves that are connected to other people, are connected to creation or other, parts of the universe, right? Wanting to create to some, wanting to connect to something bigger than ourselves. And so I think, everyone brings to the table a spiritual life. And so I think that, the humanities, I think historically, in the Jesuit education system, but also contemporarily, has something therefore to offer everyone, right? Because yes, there are, you're taking theology, of course, and you're getting an introduction, right, to the Bible and Christian theology, but you're also learning about history and the history of what humans have done and what they've achieved, and the thing, unfortunate things that humans have done, right? And you're also getting the fine arts, right? Which, explore questions of aesthetics and beauty and meaning and human experience and different perspectives. And then you get philosophy, that's asking questions about ethics, or, how do we know what we know? What is the nature of reality? And then you get something like, my own field, writing, learning about human expression, human connection through communication. And so I think all of these things at their core touch on those spiritual questions, those fundamental questions, right? That every person has to think about and pursue for themselves. And so I definitely think that there is a link. And I don't think, even if the, kind of religious affiliations of our students change, I think that we still have something to offer them. And, I was really interested in, as in preparation for this conversation, kind of reading a little bit about, humanities education in the Jesuit tradition, and how a lot of it was grounded in texts that were not written by Catholics or Christians. A lot of it was grounded in texts by Roman and Greek thinkers like Plato and Aristotle and Cicero, right? And the Jesuits, even the early Jesuits, didn't see a disconnect, right? They didn't kind of divide the world into secular and sacred, right? Which I think is an overly simplistic and sometimes unfruitful binary. They actually saw that, no, these, the works of Cicero have something to say to our students about what it means to be a good person, what it means to serve other people, right? And so so I just think, I think this speaks to the fact that the humanities are essential, because we all have these interior spiritual lives, and that everyone, regardless of their faith background, should have a space to explore those questions. And so going back to Sean's earlier question about what draws me here is that we have the humanities on campus. They are so central, and it is a place for students. And Paula, you also asked about, how have I seen students spiritually develop over their 4 years here? And I have to say that's been one of the greatest gifts of this job, is being able to walk with students and watch them grow. Honestly, they help me grow too. It's not, a unidirectional relationship, right? My students challenge me to rethink things, and I've certainly grown as a person. And what I've noticed over the years is that, especially, and that's another great thing about Loyola, because it's small, I have students in multiple classes, so I really do get to see them over time, is that you see, first of all, their perspectives enlarge, over their time here, right? I mean, and this is true for anyone, when you're 18, 19, right? Your experience of the world is relatively smaller, right? You've got your home, your school, maybe your church or other, social or cultural institutions, your hometown, and that might be it, right? And so I think one of the things that the humanities do is that they help to expand our students' perspectives. And so what I've observed is that students start to realize that, hey, maybe I thought that the world worked like this, but actually there are a lot of other people in the world who are doing things in different ways, or even in, for example, in this country, things have been different in the past, that they haven't always been the way that I've experienced them, right? And that widening of perspective, I think, cultivates empathy. I think it cultivates compassion. I think and when I've seen this in my students, it cultivates openness. And that's what, we talk about liberal education, one of the meanings or original meanings of that word is like this open-handedness, right? And this freedom. And so I definitely, see students who deepen their perspective, become more open, become more compassionate. But I think they develop a care for justice. I think they develop a care for community. And again, I've seen this, now I've been here 8 years, I've seen this again and again and again. And I think, I don't know, again, that's one of the things that keeps me here. I think that's one of the great things about a Jesuit education, is that our students do grow. And I think as a professor, I can enter into that. There's not this weird, secular sacred divide where, oh no, that's off limits. I'm just a professor. I'm just here to teach content. And then I go home, right? That in fact, the atmosphere and environment here, motivated by our Jesuit values, encourages those types of student-professor relationships that I really cherish. I was just actually communicating with one of our alumni this morning, who was updating me about his new job placement, and that was just exciting to see. So yes, I do think that the humanities and spirituality are intertwined, and you can see that in our students. Absolutely.
Martin, thank you for opening that up for us. And I have to say, there's so much. This as you were talking, I was trying to capture some of the notes, because I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much to touch on that you just named. But I really just want to say, you talked about the opening, right? The expansion that happens. And as you're talking about the connection between the humanities and spirituality, I just found myself thinking of I once heard Father Steve Sunborg, who was a Jesuit and a former president at Loyola University. When he was asked about spirituality, he described spirituality as one's engagement with mystery. And as you were talking about this connection between the humanities, I just couldn't help. All of a sudden, I started finding myself thinking about just how your writing course, or how the humanities might help a student to look at the mystery of themselves, right, as they understand themselves in a larger context, or who they are as this developing young adult, or the mystery of new ideas and the expansion of thought. So as you're talking about that, the way that we give structure and we give tools and skills for a student to understand themselves or to engage mystery, because we know that within ourselves and within our world, when we bump up against something that is mysterious, we have different reactions. I often think about one of the first times I came across, I was out on a hike in the Pacific Northwest, and I came around this corner, and I'd been hiking in the woods. And as I came around the corner, there was just a wide open view of the mountains in front of me. And it was just this expansive view. And I remember it caught my breath. It just, it caused me to look beyond just the trees in front of me and this broad horizon. And I remember it being a sense of awe. And I've had that experience a lot in nature. For me, it's a spiritual connection, but I've also can think about the faculty members in my life or mentors who have helped me to have that moment of awe when I've engaged the expanse within a relationship or plumbing the depths of who I am. So as you're talking about this, I'm curious if you might talk about the ways that you see the humanities or an education grounded in humanities helping to better prepare our students to lead, learn, and serve in a diverse and changing world. How are the ways that they take that and apply it to being people for and with others?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really glad that you brought the term mystery into this conversation. And I think that, a good solid humanities education confronts those questions of mystery and provide that expansiveness. So I'm a writing professor. My primary focus is teaching students rhetoric and persuasion and argument. And a lot of what that involves is getting them to think outside of themselves, right? If you want to be an effective communicator, you have to think about how other people see the world, right? How other people connect with the world. Because, a lot of times ineffective communication is when we're writing for ourselves, right? And so very concretely in my own work as a writing professor, I have found that there's this mystery, right, between us and another human being, and us and people who may be different from us in some ways. And so I feel like in my discipline, rhetoric helps, confront students with that and make sure that we read a variety of texts that kind of open their perspective and make them think, oh, I hadn't thought of the world that way, or I didn't know other people thought about things this way. And then what we try to do is we try to begin bridging that gap through the written word and other forms of communication. And of course, I think, similar things are happening in other disciplines where, students are confronting, questions that don't necessarily have easy answers, questions that humans have been wrestling with for thousands of years, right? And we're going to keep wrestling with them for thousands of years. I mean, I think that's one of the great things about the humanities is that we get connected to this long human heritage, right? Of engaging with mystery, thinking about the universe, thinking about our place in it. And so I think, but it's not just about having students confront and engage with mystery. I think it's also, as you said, Sean, giving them tools to make that engagement productive, so that they can then go out and be people for others. And, I think, again, going back to what I said, how, the other, another person can be a mystery. I think one of the things that the humanities can do is that they can help one, shed a light on some of those mysteries, right? So in a literature class, you are reading novels, short stories, poems from the perspectives of other people, right? You are beginning to open up, that mysterious gap between us and others, right? By literally reading about, and, maybe even putting yourself in the shoes of someone whose life might be very different from yours. History, for example, gives us critical context for understanding the mystery of why things are the way they are, right? What explains how we got here, where we are today, right? And then to think about, well, how do we get to a different place in the future? And so what I think that the humanities do is I think that they cultivate in students habits of mind for asking good questions, for being okay with gray, right? Not every, actually life is very complicated, right? Very few things are black and white, right? And I think the humanities help students be okay with that, right? That there's going to be ambiguity in life. I also think, of course, that the humanities provide some content knowledge as well, to help us engage with people. And so if we're serving, our siblings in Baltimore, for example, we need to understand why Baltimore is so segregated. How did that happen? Okay. If we want to begin advocating for change, right? Whether that, if that's, changing laws and policies, right? Or if that's, getting people interested in joining a movement, or that's going to take effective communication, right? That's going to take rhetoric, right? And so, so I think it's, the humanities both, confront students with mystery, but it doesn't leave them there, right? It says, yes, there is mystery around us. It's not, sometimes it's scary, but it's also inspiring, awe-inspiring. But also, humans have developed ways of engaging with mystery and moving forward and making the world a better place. And these various disciplines, right, from theology to philosophy, provide some of those habits of mind, some of those intellectual tools to do that work.
Martin, thank you so much. I find that the treasure of a Jesuit education is that whether you end up majoring in engineering or in communication or in speech path, my joy and excitement of being in this academic environment is the possibility that all of those disciplines will be infused by the humanities, right? And I remember having a conversation some years ago with someone about how can we make sure that the faculty in communication, the faculty in marketing, the faculty in engineering, the person teaching biochem, and all these other disciplines that may somehow have to be a lot more specialized and technological, retain that essence of the humanities in their coursework to provide much needed context, and in the spirit in how that course is taught. So I know that you just came from a wonderful retreat, marking the end of your first year as director for the center. And I'm just curious, how do you see the humanities, the teaching of humanities, maybe expanding beyond the traditional disciplines of philosophy, history, writing, theology? how do you see that being maybe adopted by other departments at Loyola within their own coursework? That's something that I have always really been excited about, that possibility. I think it's something that is doable, and I'm just wondering, what has come out of the retreat? Are there new ideas about that?
Yeah, so let me just give a little bit of background. I'm finished, as Paula said, I'm finishing my first year as director of the Center for the Humanities at Loyola, and I wanted at the end of my first year to gather the center steering committee. It's basically it's a governing board together to just kind of do some visioning, to do some work thinking about the future in a more concentrated way, in a less distracted space. And a lot of ideas came out of that. And I think it's a challenge. I mean, I think what I'm hearing in your question, Paula, is it's the nature of the modern university is that that I think is different from early Jesuit educational institutions, is this kind of specialization, right, based off the German model of the university. And what happens is that each department can get siloed, right, get isolated, doing their own things. And there's, of course, a lot of value in specialization, right? And I think in a modern world, you need people who have some type of special expertise. And I think, university can be richer for that. But the danger, of course, is then we're not speaking to each other. And at a Jesuit institution, where the humanities are so core, so critical, that can mean that the humanities education kind of stops, right, at our core curriculum, right, and it doesn't, bleed into other areas. And so I think that's a real challenge. It is one that we talked about. I don't know that I have easy or solutions right now. I hope I'm not. I just certainly don't want to disappoint. But one of the things that we talked about is how can we encourage more pedagogical partnerships across humanities and non-humanities disciplines. So right now we have a grant program that supports team teaching. And so the parameters of that particular grant are that two faculty members from different departments, get together. They plan a course, an interdisciplinary course that they're both teaching, and that draws students from both of those disciplines as well as other students. And the idea is to provide a rich fusion of the perspectives that those disciplines bring to a particular issue or topic that couldn't be explored in the same way if that topic was addressed in each of those disciplines on their own. And that, I'd say, that program, I think, has been really successful. This year we were pleased to support a partnership between a professor in psychology and a professor in English about madness, looking at it from psychological and literary perspectives. And in fact, in the history of those disciplines were speaking to each other, right? But that's a student taking a class in psychology or literature may not know, right, that there is a shared, there is a historical dialogue between those two disciplines, right? But this particular class allows students to see that. And that's just one example. I mean, there are several other examples that I could mention as well. And so one of the things that the Center Steering Committee talked about is we want to encourage more of those partnerships, not just in humanities and social science, but also can we do team teaching between engineering and visual arts? Can we do team teaching between law and social responsibility and writing, right? And so one of the things that we're looking to do is to stimulate more of those partnerships, right? And to actually encourage people to think in creative ways about how they could partner, with someone else and offering, a rich educational experience as found in one of these team talk courses. I think there's also a desire, and we're going to be working on this over the next couple of years, of putting on events where we show these intersections between the humanities and non-humanities disciplines. So what did the humanities have to say about climate change? What did the humanities have to say about AI, right? And the ways that algorithms basically affect almost every aspect of our lives now. And so, the retreat was really about doing some visioning work. And then, the next couple of years, we hope to follow up on those things with concrete steps. But, if anyone listening has ideas, please get in contact with me. I'm always really interested in knowing about new things that the center can do. One other idea I'll add here is, I think we just need, as faculty, I think we just need more spaces to hear about what each other's doing. And I know there have been efforts in the past to do that. I think one of the challenges is that the nature of being a faculty member has changed. We just have a lot to do, a lot more to do perhaps than we did in the past. And so I think, having lunch or coffee with a faculty member doesn't always happen because, we're serving our students, we're doing our research, right? We're trying to help the university. And so, I would say if there are, ways that we can cultivate those spaces where there can be that kind of cross-disciplinary communication, collaboration, sharing, like at the teaching enhancement workshop, for example, I think that is also a way to stimulate these partnerships. But I agree, it's a challenge. It's hard, but certainly something the center is aware of and hopes to make some progress on in the next few years.
So, Martin, thank you very much for going into this. And I'm really fascinated by, as you started to lean into the challenges that that face the humanities or faculty in general. I love the proposals of how do we build these partnerships, pedagogical partnerships. What a great term and an idea. But you started to talk about this idea of just time, right? I mean, how much time is there? And time is always the challenge that's before us. As a child, I remember hearing an advertisement for a bank, and the bank, it was someone coming to the teller, the drive-up teller, when that was a thing, and asking if they could buy more time. And as a child, I remember thinking, who would want more time? And as an adult, that is the constant challenge. And it's the challenge that I find when we're working with students is this container of time. And I hear it from faculty, I hear it from administrators. So this is, how do we create space and time? As you said, more and more demands are put upon us. And I think when we think within education, we have students who education is not cheap. It's a huge investment. And there can be some arguments, and it's not my argument, but there are arguments out there to say, someone should get in, get their education, and get out, right? Get in, get your specific education, and go out and to serve the world. And I'm curious, what is the argument? What is your argument? I mean, and you've laid out a lot of that here in this conversation, but what is the argument if you're at an open house and a student in a family comes through the university and says to you, what is the added value? how am I going to come out the other side of this education, going through the humanities? What is going to be the added value to my education and who I am? What is your response to that? Or how do you address that argument that really we just need to be utilitarian in education versus the model that we are offering?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a great question, and I've served at open houses, representing my department, and I've gotten that question or questions like it multiple times. Although encouragingly, not perhaps not as often as I expected. I actually think at least some of the parents and students I've been interacting with over the past couple of years, there does, and maybe, of course, obviously there's selection bias because they're coming here, right? But I do see that, a number of them already, want, either the students want for themselves or the parents want for their, children to have this kind of, this liberal education. I think there are at least kind of two responses. I think sticking within the utilitarian frame, I think, studies show that a well-rounded education that, is deeply rooted in the humanities makes, students upon graduation more agile, more flexible in the workplace, right? They've gained these tools for thinking expansively, for researching, for asking good questions, these very strong communication skills, right? That I think comes from a strong, humanities background that actually employers really want. And these are, these quote unquote soft skills, which, are actually really hard to teach, right? When a student gets a job, right, it's actually, relatively speaking, not that hard to learn a computer language, or not that difficult to learn a new piece of software. And there, a job can provide training modules for that. It's a lot harder to train someone in the habits of mind of considering other perspectives or thinking about the broader context, right? Or to even be thinking about the justice, angle, which I think a lot of companies, at least publicly, are saying they're interested in, right? And so I just point people to research to say this is actually what employers want. This is what medical schools want. Medical schools love to accept students with humanities majors, because those students are going to be working with patients, right? And so they're going to have a sense of the human, right? We want doctors who are humane and ethical, right? And who can think about their patients, not just in terms of symptoms for a disease, but as holistic people, right? And that kind of gets to the second part of my answer, but so I think utilitarianly speaking, the humanities have a lot of value to add. And also I think that shows in our track record with our alumni. I think our alumni do very well. Of course, I'm mostly familiar with the alumni from the writing department, but I know that this is true across the board. But we have, gosh, I'm always impressed and amazed by what our students go off to do, right? They tend to become the leaders in the companies and fields that they find themselves in, I think because of their humanistic education, because it gives them that broader perspective, that ability to imagine. And we haven't talked about imagination yet, but I think the humanities are really key in cultivating imagination, right? And innovation, right? And I also want to just claim innovation is not just, something that is true of the business and tech world, right? I mean, innovation, invention, creativity are all things that we cultivate in our students. So my creative writing colleagues, when they're teaching poetry or they're teaching fiction, okay, maybe their students aren't going to become novelists or poets, but they're kind of exercising their mind and getting the skills for thinking creatively, for thinking outside the box, for saying, hey, we've never done it this way, right? I mean, all of those things, I could just go on and on, but all those things I think come out of a humanities education. But I also think that it's important to challenge the purely utilitarian in terms of economic premise of such a question, right? Because I think what we're offering is not just a way to make students better workers, right? We're not just offering students a way to make more money or to climb the corporate ladder, right? And again, this is one of the things that attracts me about Loyola and Jesuit education is the fact that we educate for the whole person, right? That our education gives students, yes, the tools and skills to succeed in the professional world, but also the tools and skills to be citizens in their communities, right? Active citizens who are working to make their communities better places, right? More just places, more inclusive and equitable places. And you need the humanities to do that, right? You need the humanities, again, as we talked about earlier, for that context, for that understanding of the human and those, big human questions. And of course, then going back to, Paula's question about the humanities and spirituality, right? If every student comes to us with an inner life, then we're also giving them tools and texts for continuing to cultivate that inner life, right? And so I think, when we get that question at an open house, for example, I think first of all, we should feel confident that we can answer the utilitarianism. But I think then we should also say, but we care about your student as a human, as a person. And if they come here, they know that you can rest assured that they're going to be faculty, staff, administrators who are looking out for their students across all the dimensions of their life, across all of their identities, and that we're still here for them after they graduate. And so, yeah, I think my answer is both and to that question. Yeah.
Martin, I wanted to share with you that so many of the conversations that I've had with students while on the pilgrimage I mentioned, there are two words that always came up in conversation about them reflecting on their experiences at Loyola. And most of the students just graduated. One of them was their ability to feel appreciation for everything they were seeing along the way. So if we went into a church, the appreciation of all the hands and all the work that went into creating those very beautiful spaces, the time, the effort, the sacrifices. So they're thinking, they're multi-layered, thinking about all the different groups and peoples and experiences and resources that have to happen in order for this beautiful building to come to be created. The other thing that, or other word that keeps coming up in conversation with students is how they really feel transformed during their time at Loyola. And I truly believe that that transformation, a big part of that transformation is because of our deep grounding in the humanities, and there are, they have experiences in different groups across campus that add on to that, but without that groundwork, without that foundation, it just really sets up the stage for that transformation that I think is so critical. And one of the biggest really values that we offer our students is you come here and when you leave in 4 years, you're a better human being. And a lot of that has to do with how committed our faculty is, not only within this critical disciplines of, writing, philosophy, theology, English, literature, the languages. We haven't spoken about the languages, but how critical are languages, you know? Some of the students in the pilgrimage, I kept hearing, we were in Spain, and we were in Italy, and they were saying, gosh, I wish I knew Basque. Gosh, I wish I knew more Italian. Like, because they want, you know, they are curious, they want to connect, they want to understand. And I think that I was so happy to hear that a graduating student wishes he or she could study more. So anyway, but so this has been extremely insightful for me personally, because I am a faculty member, and I'm always trying, you know, I am in a department, in a discipline, you know, communication, where it is very fast paced. And one of the things that I love about disciplines that are at the core of the humanities, that they really, you have to force yourself to slow down. You cannot appreciate those texts if you're rushing as if you would, like, down on Instagram, right? I mean, it is crazy. It is so challenging for us, you know, when we're having all this, like, new young faces coming into our courses, and, you know, their idea of communication is social media, it's Instagram, it's TikTok. This is so very challenging for us. So I mean, to have an education that is grounded in the humanities is so countercultural at this point in time, and why I even think it's even more important to have that. But anyway, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart, because I mean, just listening to you is so reaffirming in just you know, our vocation at Loyola, our mission, and why it is important that we keep our education with a very strong grounding in the humanities, and that it infuses every course on our campus community. Sean, do you want to add anything else?
Yeah, I do. Thanks, Paula. Martin, thank you so much for this conversation. I know that I'm walking away with so many things just to sit with from this conversation. Just, you know, as we've talked about the connection between the humanities and Jesuit education, we could have done a whole series on each of the elements that you have named throughout this time, you know, thinking about the imagination, you know, this holistic worldview, you know, as we think about Ignatius, and as he came into the world, he sent the Jesuits out into the world, and they saw the world as their church, not as a building, right? And as you were talking about this, what are the ways that we send our students out to engage with the expansiveness of the world, and the expansiveness within themselves, their own thoughts and their own desires and dreams. So I'm really grateful for the way that you have unpacked this conversation, for the way you have championed Jesuit education and ignited this conversation with excitement and joy and hope, and also shared with us why this is such a valuable education, and why someone might consider attending Loyola University Maryland in pursuit of a Jesuit education. So thank you very much, Martin, for your time, for all your expertise and your leadership here at Loyola.
Thank you both for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation. It was a pleasure to be able to talk about the humanities and Jesuit education with both of you. I really appreciate it. Thank you.